أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الصلاة والسلام على رسولنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه وأتباعه وسلم. Go ahead, Asim.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. We are reading from the words, the 23rd word, second chapter. We were on page 334, and we are from the second, third, fourth paragraph. That's where we were reading from, which is the third remark. And just to reiterate what we were studying, the main theme is basically from the verse from the Quran. Indeed, we have created man on the most excellent of patterns, then sent him down to the lowest of the low, except those who believe and do good deeds, which is from the Quran chapter 95, verses 4 to 6. So I'll continue. Basically, I remember we were discussing the way the man is endowed with so many faculties of senses and feelings, and there is a purpose for those faculties that man has. So we will continue what the author says. Thus, this great wealth in faculties and abundant capital was certainly not given for procuring this temporary worldly life.
Actually, we can reread the previous paragraph as well. I guess we read the previous paragraph but didn't discuss too much.
Sure, yeah, we can do that. Okay, good. Okay, so just a paragraph before that. The reason for man's wealth in regard to faculties is this, and : by reason of the mind and thought, man's senses and feelings have greatly developed and expanded, and numerous emotions have come into being because of the multiplicity of his needs. Numerous emotions have come into being because of the multiplicity of his needs. And his senses have become extremely diverse. And because of the comprehensiveness of his nature, desires have appeared turned towards numerous aims. And because he has numerous duties due to his nature, his members and faculties have expanded greatly. So the way the members and faculties expand is tied to the way we recognize how much our human nature is, and our needs are very much into play in this. Okay, and since he has been created with a nature capable of performing every sort of worship, he has been given abilities which embrace the seeds of all perfections. Okay, so I know some of you guys wanted to discuss some items in this paragraph. Is that correct?
Yes, whatever comes to people's minds.
Sure. So would anybody want to talk on something that attracted them or took their attention?
I have a question. I guess I would like to understand what other people understood from the statement where the author says, and because of the comprehensiveness of his nature, desires have appeared turned towards numerous aims. I find this particular statement a bit puzzling, so I'm not able to deconstruct this into something that makes sense to me. So I would like to understand what others understand from this.
Sure, we can start from the first part, like seeing what the human nature is.
Awesome. Like we couldn't quite hear like what Qasim's question is. Qasim, can you speak up and like ask the question again, or
Yeah, so the question from Qasim is in the middle of the paragraph. It says, because of the comprehensiveness of his nature, desires have appeared turned towards numerous aims. So this is what Qasim wants to discuss a bit more in terms of understanding what this sentence is alluding to. So I propose that we look at first start from the beginning of the sentence and see what the comprehensiveness of man's nature means, right? And then how, because as we realize that how we are, humans are made in terms of all these faculties that this paragraph is mentioning, all these senses and feelings, we realize that there is quite a lot of things that a human being is capable of as compared to the other beings that we observe in creation. So a man has a lot of these senses and feelings, and that if we understand that, that leads to our understanding that with that comes along certain desires that we have in terms of how we experience this world, or in terms of every day that we go through, if that is making any sense, right?
I guess what confuses me is if I look at it from my perspective and I say, okay, I have a desire, and I guess naturally, and I'm using the word carefully here, like in the sense, like in my createdness, I find myself with the need to fulfill that desire as well. So when I read the word aim, it throws me off because I guess maybe my preconceived understanding of the word aim has always been something that comes from my own, I guess, choices or intellectual desire or reasoning, as opposed to like what's innate. So for example, I'll just simplify this to a very physical example. Let's say I have the desire to fulfill my thirst. So if drinking water is not necessarily going to be my aim, but rather I see that as something which has to happen because of how I've been created. I know I reduced it to something very like physical, but I guess the same could be said about human desires. Like if I have this desire for eternity, I've been given that need to begin with. It's not something that I am creating, so it's not really my aim. I guess it's not really, I'm not creating that aim, but I'm rather just choosing it or applying it, if that makes sense. And that's just what confuses me a little bit.
Yeah, anybody wants to comment on that? So taking your example, for example, about being thirsty and then drinking water to quench that thirst, right? So, I mean, that is a need that human beings are made with, to be thirsty, right? We thirsty, hungry, we need rest. That's how the nature of human beings is, right? So, and then if we say that, okay, yeah, just to satiate my thirst, I'm gonna drink water, and that's about it, right? And I can continue doing that for as long as the time I have in this world. So that does not make much sense, that that's the purpose of me being, given existence in such a way that, yeah, I get thirsty, I get hungry, and I get the water I need, and I eat whatever I need to. So all these is what the comprehensiveness of the nature is talking about, that there is a specific reason that we are made in such a way, right? And you were alluding to that, Qasim, as I was understanding, that there is definitely in that process of feeling the need, and then while we are being, satiated with the water, for example, when we are thirsty, all these have a particular aim. they're not just there for the, to satisfy the physical needs that human beings have, but there is a purpose and an aim for that, which is what at least this author is mostly focuses on, right? So the aim is leading from that experience goes to something else, to somewhere else. So that experience is like a segue to understanding, what it means to be thirsty, and then what it means to be satisfied after having the water, and realizing that what that satisfaction means in terms of my humanity, right? So definitely, I don't want to jump to it, but definitely it goes towards realizing like the source of the feelings that I'm having, and the looking into the names that there is, satisfaction is a feeling and mercy is a feeling, right? Or whatever, the beauty is a feeling or a quality that I experience. So every experience leads me to conclude about something.
Right. I think if we read the next sentence, actually the next one, it kind of answers that as well, or is along the same lines of what you were saying, Asim, that where the author says, and since he has been created with a nature capable of performing every sort of worship. Like I read this more as a conclusion, saying that, okay, because I find myself with this desire and this need to fulfill this desire, which seems as if it's aimed towards, the fulfillment of the desire. To your point, everything is that at the core of it is realization. It's like I'm realizing the fact that I've been created in a way where I want this desire, which isn't truly mine to begin with, but has been given to me. Again, but I want to see it fulfilled.
Right. This aim becomes like a sort of a discovery mechanism.
Exactly.
Like I just getting to know who the source of existence of these desires and the fulfillment of these desires can be. And that's what this last sentence, at least as you're saying, that it, when he says performing every sort of worship, that it becomes one of the aims also for every member or faculty of that the human being has.
I'm thinking how to formalize my thought. So when Qasim asked the question, the comprehensive nature and the desires had appeared turned towards numerous aims. The way that I understand this statement, think of it this way, like this is something that we experience actually on day-to-day basis. I think it becomes more visible for me. Think of an Alzheimer's patient that used to be connected with everything, like all the individuals around her and everything in life. And if you think about it, like actually as a human being, and you also see that like in the little child, like as growing up, you start like some relationship with everything around you. You want to explore everything around you, everything in the universe. So there is this like comprehensive, if you like, emotions or like faculties that is connected with all the rest of the universe. So within Alzheimer's patient, for example, you see that like step by step, those like relations or connections are like being cut almost. Like you don't have any more interest in those kind of relationships. And at the end, like it comes to a point that like, you do not have any kind of consciousness about your existence anymore. And when you reach that point, you just become a vegetable. Like you are not a human being anymore. So like, I think this example like makes sense to me because like you like vividly see what it really means to be human being. So it's not really just the body. It is something a lot more than that. And what in the statement like I think refers to that man has that kind of nature that is connected with all the rest of the beings in the universe. And that is the comprehensive nature of his. And when he talks about the aims, those are the desires or like the things that you are connected with in the creation. For example, you are even like fascinated by the beauty in the galaxies as well as like in the like atomic level. So we have that kind of like comprehensiveness, and everything else in the creation are the aims for those desires.
So I think it would be fair to say that the comprehensiveness is more along the lines of the potential that, you know, us as creation has to, again, I like the word that Asim used, discover our reality.
Yeah. Any other comment?
So Asim, I would like to actually study this paragraph from the very beginning, because I don't even, maybe I'm not in the right frame of mind, but I'm having a difficult time following why he's saying what he's saying in each of those sentences. Are they things additional to each other? Is one thing trying to elaborate something previous? So I mean, I would just repeat Qasim's question about not one sentence, but the whole paragraph, starting with the first sentence. I don't understand. So maybe anyone who is following can help kind of comment line by line and see what are they understanding from each of the things he's saying.
In the same spirit, I wanted to ask maybe a specific question about within this paragraph, where it says, by reason of the mind and thought, man's senses and feelings have greatly developed and expanded. And my question is, what's the relationship between the reason and humans or man's greatly developed senses and feelings? How is it that the fact that the man has reason and mind, somehow man has much, more comprehensive feelings and senses? I couldn't make that connection.
I've been actually reading this new book. I just started a few days ago. It's called The Power of Now. And what's funny is that just today I was reading a chapter which kind of talked about these 2 points, the reason of mind and thought, and the relationship between that and feelings and emotions, basically. And as much as puzzling as that chapter was, I'll try to, I guess, maybe apply what that person was saying and that's how I'm able to make sense of this, because in the chapter itself it kind of didn't, but here it does. And basically what the author in that book was saying, that we, or I myself, am not my mind and thought. And for me, it was a bit harder concept to grasp, because I always kind of considered that to be part of me, as opposed to something which is a tool that I myself uses. And the author basically suggests this idea that, okay, your mind or your ability to think is this tool that you have to utilize. You are not the tool itself. And by making that distinguishing factor, by clarifying that you are not your mind, everything that you come into interaction with, you're using this tool in the best of its abilities to I guess, to recognize or acknowledge, and we can even go as far as the word worship, our reality. And as a result of utilizing that tool, which is our mind and our thought, it has, I guess, the byproduct of using that tool is emotions and feelings. So I guess if I was to use an analogy, if I'm using a hammer to, hit the nail into the wood, the byproduct of that might be the sound of the hammer striking the nail. So just like that, using my mind on my, I guess, existence, or for my existence, has this byproduct of senses and feelings that must be paid attention to. And it's interesting because in this particular sentence, the author says, and numerous emotions have come into being. So because of the multiplicity of his needs. So it's interesting, I guess, if one was to question, because of the multiplicity of his needs, like, what does that mean? I see that as, again, utilizing my mind and my thought to question my desires, my needs. And as I utilize that tool, the byproduct of that, which is the emotions and feelings, come into, I guess, being, or come into existence in a way. Like, I'm not necessarily I'm not the source of the existence of those, but through this interaction, they're coming into being. And as I experience that, I'm basically developing them. I'm utilizing it in the right way. I'm not sure what expanded here means, but this is what I was able to understand from this, from the first part of this paragraph.
Yeah, thank you, Qasim. You touched on something that's what's not, I guess, in this sentence. Again, I would like to go to the very first sentence also. But so when he says, men's senses and feelings have greatly developed, it doesn't seem like this line means that the feelings come into being because of reason. As you, I guess, the author you were quoting, what I got from your summary was, he was saying these senses and feelings simply exist because of thought. That's one thing. But here, he's not so much saying that they exist because of thought, but they have greatly developed and expanded. And this seems, I don't know if this sentence is the same as when he says that the emotions have come into being because of the multiplicity of his needs. So in your just comment, you just interpreted this needs to be, again, reasoning and thought, but I'm not sure, I'm not able to yet fully understand for myself if this needs is the same as the mind is. So, how are these things related? So when he talks about the developing and the expanding of faculties, and then he talks about emotions coming into being. So I just want to follow the line. Is the second sentence an explanation of the first, a repetition of the first, or a new thing, different thing? Is the man's senses and feelings that are greatly developed is one point, and then a second point is that the emotions are coming into being from needs. And how are these related? Because I'm confused myself, I will confuse others as well, but I want to I guess I have nothing to say except that I'm just looking at the sentences and just looking at them, and I don't really understand what they're saying right yet.
So I may have been misunderstood when I was talking about needs and how the relationship between needs is linked to mind and thought. I guess if I was to use a different analogy, I would say like my needs is the question as I see it, and if it's a mathematical question, it needs some form of an equation to solve, and my mind and thought, those tools are basically that equation. It's the formula or the method to apply to the question. And once I apply my mind and my thought to these needs and desires that I find myself with, as a result of that, I will have these senses and feelings, the things that I can truly, I guess, feel, and confirm the existence of that feeling that, okay, yes, I feel joy, yes, I feel peace in this particular answer. And I think the developing and the expanded part is a bit blurry to me as well. But at a very ground level, how I understand developing is that it's the belief or certainty in the equation, right, or in the method, tends to grow, and you basically apply a similar method to a larger question, a more complex question, and you just see that it keeps working. So these tools, mind and thought, are allowing us to basically find answers to questions that keep arising, or never-ending questions. So maybe expansion is linked to the continuity of the questions or continuity of the needs.
Can someone? I'm sorry. Can someone say something about the first sentence? So he says, I'm sorry, Asim. I don't want to become the moderator. I'm just reading this, and the reason for man's wealth in regard to faculties. Is there someone who has maybe, when reads this sentence and something very definite is coming to their mind, that yeah, they understood that what is being referred to, man's wealth. So wealth in regard to faculties. The word faculties is very vague to me in English. So maybe people who read the Turkish, would they be able to say, such as, for example, like, and then in the next sentence.
Whereas if we go back to previous two paragraphs, he was giving a metaphor in two paragraphs he was talking about a man gave one of his servants 10 pieces of gold and to another servant 1,000 pieces of gold. Were you with us when we were discussing this part?
Maybe the problem is that I wasn't, and maybe that's why I'm confused, so I deserve it.
So maybe I should quickly go over it. So in the metaphor, he was talking about a man who gives $10 to one of his servants and 1,000 to another, and sending them to a market. So the first one with the 10 golds were buying a very high quality cloth. But for the second one, when he was giving him 1,000 golds, he also have written something on a paper and put it into his pocket. So the second guy goes to the market, but he doesn't read the paper. He simply looks at the first one, and then goes to the guy who sold him a cloth, gives 1,000 golds, and asks for a cloth, without thinking that 10 golds is good enough for a cloth. So this should be for something more. And then he says that what was it? This shopkeeper gave him a suit of the very worst quality cloth. And then he says that this is the case with human and animals. Animals are given qualities. Humans are given qualities. I mean, animals are given eyes, ear, tongue, the material qualities are given to animals and to humans as well. But there's a difference between them. So if you just take it from a material perspective, not much of a difference, one might say. Now the author is expanding this. Why is man wealthy 1,000 golds relative to animals? Because if you think of it, let's say from a material perspective again, there are two computers. One has a camera, the other has a camera. One has a hard disk, the other has a hard disk. So both of them are computers. What's the difference, one would say? But if one of them is a super computer, the other one is just a bare minimum computer, you would say that there's a difference between them in terms of their capacity, whatever. I guess in this now paragraph that we are reading, the reason for man's wealth in regard to faculties is this. So what makes man a better computer than animals? So why are you saying that this one is better? It's just another animal, like a speaking animal. So what's more? You know the descriptions of man in philosophy much better than I do. So like a thinking animal or speaking animal, but still it's just an animal. He's now saying that no, by reason of mind and thought, man's senses and feelings have greatly developed and expanded. And just I would like to talk about this one, and we can keep talking for the rest. So for example, humans' eyes versus animals' eyes. So because of humans' ability to think and reason, then human sight becomes much extended in terms of its capability.
Be used to perceive.
Yeah, it can perceive a lot of beauties. It can extract meanings out of what it sees. Now it can evaluate what it is seeing. It's not simply taking pictures anymore. It's not simply a camera that records. But through thought, the capacity to think, human eye now becomes much higher than animal eyes. And I guess this is applicable to anything because now human senses becomes only a tool to collect data, but now human has the capacity to process this data. This is only one aspect of it. Because the other aspect is going to be humans' needs, which is also making those tools adding another dimension. Because needs are also various. If you take it for animal, for instance, the desire for eyes, let's say, is to find a direction. Eyes are good for the need of an animal for an eye is to find for food, find direction. But man is not only using eyes, the only need that eye fulfills is not finding direction, finding food. But I have a desire to see beauty and appreciate beauty. Or I have a desire to, for example, read things, understand things, whatever, just count it. We can talk about it for stomach as well. For an animal, it is just to survive, eating food and living. But for a man, is to appreciate the giver of, the Razzaq, the provider, or tasting all different foods and recognizing its maker, not only one type of food. So
it's the mind and the reason, which is technically, how should I say it? Like those are the faculties that gives the consciousness to man, consciousness of the existence of every single let's say desire that's what it's used in the text. Every single desire that man has, like the awareness comes like with the consciousness, and consciousness is based on the mind and the reason.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much. So it really clears up a lot the first few sentences for me. Thank you.
Excellent. Alhamdulillah. So anything more on this paragraph before we move on to the next one? Yeah, going back to just to give a summary. If we can all agree that. I'm sorry, somebody wants to say something?
Osman was asking for the worship part of it, and since he has been created with a nature capable of performing every sort of worship, he has been given abilities which embrace the seeds of all perfections. If anybody would like to add anything about this worship aspect.
Yeah, sure. Who wants to add to that? So because basically what I see that, we're talking about the wealth of faculties man has, the senses and the feelings. And then in the middle, he talks about that they are given for a specific purpose. They're not to be wasted. There's a reason that man is endowed with all those things, and his needs are especially tied to experience all these senses and feelings, right? That's how they are developed and nurtured. So that particular aim is what the worship is, how I see it. So let's say in the example of the thirst that is man experiences, and then getting the water. So when I recognize what this experience means, what's the meaning behind my need of being thirsty, what's the meaning of being satisfied after drinking water, and I recognize what is this source of existence of this satisfaction, the water that I drink, this feeling of thirst, then that recognition goes into the worship aspect, right? And so that's how at least my tongue, probably my stomach, my taste buds, every little thing, the more I am developing my senses and recognizing all these different faculties I have, the more they are thankful also when they experience or understand what the source is behind all these. And that is how the man becomes like a worshiping being.
And I guess this worship part is also related to the needs part that he mentioned previously. Because step by step, actually, he is paving the sides of the road just to show what's in there. So he first talked about needs. Human has several needs, which makes him more valuable in terms of those faculties. And as a consequence, if you like, of the needs comes the ability to worship. Because if I am needy, then I will recognize my neediness for a provider, which is a description of worship. And since he has been created with a nature capable of performing every sort of worship, now he is concluding the paragraph, he has been given abilities which embrace the seeds of all perfections. So perfection for man is defined him as being a worshipper. Because this is man is not, so I guess the example of mirror is perfect in here again. Man is supposed to be a mirror, and a perfect mirror is whatever it can reflect. There's something outside, but it's going to reflect it in the best manner. This is the perfection for a mirror. So mirror shouldn't have a color. Mirror shouldn't have any extra shape in it. It should be flat in order to really reflect what's out there. So colorless, shapeless, whatever. So the perfections, embracing the seeds of perfections, pertains to this aspect of man, neediness of it, and being able to recognize its neediness.
And having that need, or that intrinsic, nature that is seeking for perfection, you have to look for it as a source. You have to look for it somewhere, or you have to attribute it to something. And through each desire or the need, seeking that perfection and reaching the one who is the provider and understanding all the perfection comes from him, and having that consciousness and awareness and living with that is the worship itself.
And this is, again, going back to the metaphor. Man was given 1,000 goals. So man's perfection is not because man has more goals, but more goals in here, he is now expanding what it is. Human is wealthy in terms of being needy. But this is perfection for man. It is not man is better or perfect because he can process things more. This is not really the point. The main point is because he can now make sense of the maker more with the qualities that are given to them. in a sense, man is weaker. Man is weaker because more needy. But this is how perfection is defined for men, contrary to our general perception. We would consider someone perfect if he is stronger, if he is smarter, if he is this and that. But now he is saying that no, it's exactly the opposite. As much as your perfection is defined in terms of your neediness and how much you are cognizant of your neediness and your provider.
So what you said makes sense about the neediness. Yeah, it's interesting for every sentence to also think, now Ali, I'm starting to see what he's not saying, or what. So this concept of desire generally is understood as something negative, or at least in something we may think, we have desires for things. Why do I have desires for a thing? What is this desire? I find myself with a lot of desires for beautiful things, for things, and instead of saying desires are, so when he says that desires appear to be turned towards numerous aims, as if like one aspect of this could be, I'm not sure, but that there is desire doesn't have one meaning. That desire is not bad. Desire is not something negative. Desire doesn't have just one aim that looks to its own fulfillment. So when he says, so by saying desires have appeared, turned towards numerous aims, as if he's saying not just one aim. There is not, and so therefore, desire is not necessarily something bad. And because he has numerous duties due to his nature, it's very interesting. Duties due to his nature. So as if to understand desire, why do I desire something? One way to think is, I have this desire, this is my desire. He's saying, so instead of saying these are my desires, you are created. So why don't you say these desires are really what is demanded by, it's sort of, I am sort of almost under obligation to the way I am created, my nature. So these are duties due to his nature, or duties due to my nature is such that I desire these things. That's how I find myself affirming sort of my, as I am, desiring things that are wonderful and beautiful. And then again, his members and faculties expanded greatly now, thinking that, is this desire satisfied by, or how easy it is to satisfy these desires, and how comprehensive or how broad are these desires, to make me think that these desires that my nature just, are duties because of on me, I am just made to fulfill them. So it is in my creation to fulfill them. And what kind of fulfillment is fulfillment? How can these be fulfilled? And since he has been created with a nature capable of performing every sort of worship, it's very interesting. Of course, everyone here present here already knows this, and is blessed with this understanding that what he's doing is he's defining worship, redefining for many people worship. What do we understand from worship? What is worship? And he's saying, that when a desire is satisfied, when my expanded faculty, when that which, when I taste something, the fulfillment of that need, that desire getting satisfied, that that satisfaction of my desire, I should understand it as a performing of a worship, a sort of worship. And then relating it to saying, that what would make it worship is the perfect fulfillment of the desire. So, the following says, your abilities embrace seeds of all perfections. I understand him saying, if you try to satisfy your desires with something that is not the seed of perfection, that is to say, something that does not grow towards or tend towards perfection, you will not be able to really satisfy your need. You have abilities such that the duties that are on me, those duties will be to set those abilities that demand satisfaction would accuse me of not satisfying them. I would stand dissatisfied because I did not, because those abilities look for perfection. In other words, I cannot embrace something imperfect or an imperfect or fulfillment of a need as the goal or the end of that desire. In other words, really saying that the object of my worship, or what I truly see as fulfilling my desire, must meet that need perfectly. Because meeting of that need imperfectly is not a meeting of that need. It is not something I can appreciate as a true fulfillment of that need. So that the object of my worship, in other words, must be perfect, must be a being, must be something that looks to perfection. In other words, saying, think about it. Can you really love things that are imperfect as the object of can you fulfill your needs can you say that you are fulfilled, you can be fulfilled by imperfectly, and can you be satisfied as a human being? Would your abilities, would your nature be satisfied, or would the duties that it imposes on you in his language be fulfilled? It's very interesting how he's redefining desire, how he's redefining worship, he's redefining the object of worship, saying that all the imperfect sources that we think are fulfilling our desires are the reason of man doesn't accept them as proper, as real fulfillment. That the abilities embrace seeds of perfections. These abilities cannot embrace imperfect sources or source of fulfillment.
Hey, I was planning to say something very similar about the needs just before Faraz start talking. So when we talk about the needs, again, just like he said, for the desire, we use it in a way, or let's say I use it in a way, because this is kind of a self-critic as well, in a negative connotation, as if, the needs are bad, but having them is good, and, as if as much miserable as possible we are in the good shape. So when we say, for instance, we are perfect because we have needs, and needs are, again, something negative, but it makes us perfect. So if I'm weak, I'm better. I guess there is something missing in this the explanation, or in this the line of thought, because I'm just thinking aloud, but I guess when we talk about the perfect creation or being created in a perfect form, the perfection goes not with the needs, but goes with the creator, the qualities or the names of the creator that we can experience. So I have a capacity or I have a potentiality to experience the health giver, for instance. This is what makes me perfect. And through my sickness, I experience the name of health giver, but the perfection is not about being sick. I assume the perfection is about have this potentiality or capacity to know the name of the health giver. So we have all these capacities to know our creator with all these numerous names. And at the same time, to fulfill these capacities, to experience these names, we are also given these needs, which corresponds to these names. So we have these needs or desires to seek for these names, and our capacity or potentiality to experience or to know about these names, which makes us perfect, I assume. Because the way we put it in sentence, the needs, weakness, or desires, and the perfection, it sometimes really sounds as if, with saying that if I get poor instead of getting rich, will make me better in shape. Or if I get sick, instead of having a healthy life, will be better for me. So I shouldn't eat anything, I shouldn't enjoy anything, as much needy I am better. So I guess, again, there's something missing here. So I don't think the needs per se, like by themselves, is what makes us perfect. Our capacity or potentiality to know the creator with different names is the seed of the perfection. And the needs or weaknesses or desires are just the means to experience these names.
All right. Thank you.
So just for myself, I'm sorry, I'm being selfish, but just trying to make Birkan's point for me. So this is really exciting for me to think about, because this, in this way of putting things, it really breaks down that framework that I suffer from a lot of, like breaking my life into religious life and secular life, sacred life and mundane things, because this really is about, it is in my nature. I'm with these tools that look to these perfections. And so as I look upon a beautiful tree, which I have in my nature the ability to desire, the ability to appreciate, when I appreciate a beautiful tree, this is a sort of worship. I think this is lost on me most of the times. And I go about wanting to worship God. I meet a lot of people who say, I want to serve God. I want to worship God. I want to be conscious of God. I really want to have a close connection with God. I want to feel close to God, and so on and so forth, in different ways. And it seems like there is some mysterious or difficult process or some special knowledge or something special will happen somewhere, some place I can go to, like the mountains or Saudi Arabia, or I don't know, or Turkey, and something will happen somewhere. All of these environmental things and the right person and the right conditions will come together, and I will feel that something special. And this is an interesting framework where you could be sitting and breathing, you could be drinking water, you could be walking, I could be turning my hands, or looking, simply just being able to see something, and this seeing I can understand and experience and feel as a worship, that I as I am created as performing. I only need to simply acknowledge it and see that and say, this is what is happening. It is so simple, it's so accessible, it is so immediate, it is so non-artificial, no some superstructure on my existence of everyday life. And it's so interesting, so powerful to say that my nature is performing these kind of worship with these needs and with these desires as I fulfill them. And I see that these abilities actually are embracing or looking to perfection. And so when I drink water, I am worshiping the provider, the sustainer. That's very powerful. If I can actually believe it, it's almost too good to be true. So almost like, I don't want to believe it. But that's, so I thank you for all the comments. I'm benefiting.
Thank you. So I know Berkan sent an email out about taking a break. Do we want to do that now? 10-minute break for the prayer? Or should we conclude first in a few more minutes? What do the Philly guys suggest?
So in Philly, Isha time is at 9:04. So we will be good if we conclude at 8:45. But I don't know how the New York, New Jersey people think about it. Is it good for them to, if we finish by that time, are they going to be able to pray? Qasim says works for him. And if it's going to be very tight for them, we can give a break, quickly pray 10 minutes, come back, and then finish by 9. Quick votes from New Jersey, New York.
Sounds like it. So I think we can continue, inshallah.
Okay, then inshallah, let's continue and finish at my 8:45.
All right. Also, very beneficial comments, alhamdulillah, from both. Like, I like what Faraz was saying about the, if we can actually feel that, when we are doing whatever we do, being humans, and, realizing what are fulfilling our needs. And if we can have that recognition also along with that, to understand, like, especially, for example, the daily things that we do, which is like drinking water and eating. So, yeah, and if we can realize that these are actually seeds, or to understand what, the source or the quality that is allowing me at least to understand what it is that I'm looking for in terms of the satisfaction. And that's how I look into the what that quality is, and how my need actually goes to the perfect quality. I want to be satisfied all of the time for eternity, right? So I don't want this system of just keep going, being thirsty and hungry. Yes, it is a training. It is something that the way I am, but that's a means to actually seek out the perfect one.
Yeah, just Asim, I will seek out and worship. So when I recognize that this is someone is there is someone who knows my need and is providing. Now I'm able to say this one is providing for, and he has put in my nature an ability to seek this satisfaction at the perfect level. So I acknowledge this. He's someone who wants to give me this at the perfect level. And I say this one is satisfying me. That's worship. And that's really, that's what, in other words, if I think about the purpose of my existence, why do I exist in these complex life stories that we have, at the end, we all have these, we all breathe, we all drink, we all eat, we all see, we all have all these abilities that we exercise, we love, we cry. Every human being has all the tools needed to recognize our maker and to worship him. So yeah, seeking out and worship, which is, really acknowledging, adoring, and saying, yes, you are doing it. I acknowledge you are doing it.
Excellent. Thank you for adding that. Okay, so let's continue with the next paragraph. Thus, this great wealth in faculties and abundant capital was certainly not given for procuring this temporary worldly life. Rather, man's fundamental duty is to perform his duties, which look to innumerable aims. Man's fundamental duty is to perform his duties, which look to innumerable aims, and proclaim his impotence, poverty, and faults in the form of worship. Proclaim his impotence, poverty, and faults in the form of worship, and observing the glorifications of beings with the universal eye, to bear witness to them, and seeing the instances of the assistance of the most merciful one, to offer thanks, and gazing on the miracles of dominical power in beings, to contemplate on them as objects from which lessons may be drawn. So I think this is an extension again to what we were discussing. Basically, that we are given all these faculties and feelings and senses for a reason, that it is not just meant to be for a temporary worldly life, as the author puts it, but rather there's an aim, there's the purpose that man has to achieve. And he says that's the fundamental duty of man, and which is to perform his duties, which look to innumerable aims. And I think we discussed a little bit what those innumerable aims are, which is how, and again, he further says that it is to realize the way human beings are, which is that we are made to be needy. And it is as he puts in, impotence, poverty, and faults. And these are actually, he says, proclaim his impotence, poverty, and faults in the form of worship. So these actually, the way we are, these are ways or means for us to actually perform our worship. Because through these is how we are able to realize and perform this worship, and getting to know who the source is, and learning and getting more familiar and acquainted with the qualities of who the source is.
So every sentence might be talked about, but I'm just going to talk about one sentence one word that attracts my attention. And observing the glorifications of things with a universal eye, to bear witness to them. So the universal eye part that I would like to underline in here, because animals are given eyes, human is given eyes, so the way that I utilize my eye or my perspective should be universal. The comprehensiveness of human requires man to look at things from a universal or comprehensive way, not getting lost in the part. Seeing the big picture is something that human is up to. because we have this capacity, we are given this capacity. My needs also require that. But if I keep getting lost in the pieces of the picture, this is not human. And I suffer from that as well. And when I say it's not human, I can also bear witness that it's not human, because as I get lost in the pieces, I suffer a lot.
Like, do you mean like what, like the universal eye? But there's a picture and there's a piece part of the picture. So like focusing on the part of the picture is not a universal eye, but like seeing the bigger picture is like the universal eye. Is that what you mean by it? Or whether you focus on the pieces or you focus on the big picture, knowing that they are the reflection of an absolute beauteous one and the like absolute perfect one.
So in a way,
because like I think getting lost in the pieces is more like cutting that connection with the actual source or the like the maker, not seeing the like the beauty in relation to its maker, or like seeing the beauty in relation to its maker is the universal eye. Whether you look at the whole or you look at the pieces, doesn't matter.
That's right. That's right. Because now, literally speaking, seeing the big picture of the universe should mean, I mean, not only the picture itself, but if you take it as a book, reading the whole book, then passing a judgment about this would be, I am still accepting that it's a book, and I'm trying to see what the message that is being given in the book. So once I see the main theme, main message of the author, now I'm in contact with the author. So this would be a universal perspective for me. But if I am not concerned about the message of the book, what I can do is I can get into a paragraph, read the paragraph, and say that why does this paragraph start with this word? It shouldn't have started with that, like that. Because now, as you said, I am cutting the relation with the author. I am not really trying to understand what the author is saying. But now I'm starting to nitpicking with the words or choice of the language, this and that, which takes me away from the message of the book. And I guess this is what we do in our daily life as well. Something bad happens to me. And instead of trying to understand what this means, how it fits in my personal picture of life, historically, and also the way that I frame purpose of my life, how does this obstacle or maybe good or bad thing fits into this picture? Instead of trying to see it, I am now trying to investigate why it is happening. Because Osman said this and this, and then this triggered Abdurrahman to feel bad about me, and now Abdurrahman is making a face to me, sort of. And I then go to this way of dealing with minute details and not seeing the big picture, or not trying to, I mean, big picture, universal eye, so these are the things that...
Which is the reason for stress.
Yeah.
Unnecessary stress and anxiety.
And also, this is our, also a way which we are being trained as well. I mean, analytical thinking is to cut things into pieces and try to understand that. This is one way to understand stuff. But it becomes a habit for us at some point that we forget looking at big picture. I mean, even our scientific training is also sometimes contributing to this falsehood. It's another thing to think about. Yeah, Faraz, go ahead.
So yeah, it is helpful. But personally, I am on the fence right now. I'm not sure if I understand universal here with in the pair of universal versus particular. I was more getting the sense, given the previous line, that's something that you also touched on in your comments, that the glorifications of beings with the universal I in this, what I am getting is, not a healthy person is glorifying God only. A sick, an old person, being, a dying being or a dead being is also glorifying. So that universal, I was getting a sense that when the glorification of beings, if I don't see it with a universal eye, then what kind of, then I see it, I don't know, particular, yeah, but maybe just focusing on what is glorifying. I would take it as what I, like in one way, it is glorifying only existing in one particular way, not in all states of existence. It is glorifying. So when I'm thinking of the universal I, I'm thinking not so much about the particular versus universal, but thinking he's trying to say it's easy for if you don't understand that our needs and poverty are the tools of worship, they are to be proclaimed as form of worship, that the meeting of needs is worship, then a sick person or a dying thing or a being that is existing in a certain state of being, for example, oppressed and crying out for justice, this being can only perform a glorification to me if I look at this being with a universal eye, which means that in this state of being also, I should look at their need for justice, their crying for justice, as a glorification of justice. They want justice. They want the just. They want justice to manifest. They want. They are made to love justice. They are made miserable when they are deprived, when when they are deprived of it, or when they are in need of it. And this is a glorifying of. So maybe to cut my thing short, which is always I fail to say, universal I was understanding. I don't know. It maybe goes along with what you were saying. It's but different states of being that I think, well, this is a glorification, but this is not, as if. So I think he's saying that once we become aware of impotence, poverty, and fault and proclaim as a form of worship, then we should be able to observe glorification of beings with a universal eye in all its states.
Maybe I can try to add another color. So when I read this universal I, what I understand, so this is not, I'm not saying this is what we should understand, but I'm just saying this may be another aspect of it, is, I guess, related to what we discussed previously. When I look at something, I don't only see thing, but I also use all my faculties. So my seeing is universal, meaning I'm using all my faculties, my reasoning, my senses, my desires, my needs, and so on and so forth, to make sense of what I look. And the result is the glorification. Because to see something is glorifying the Creator, I cannot just look and see the glorification. I have to reason about it. I have to use my senses. I have to feel something there to see the glorification, to make the connection with my Creator. And what I understand from universal I is I look at something and then I start questioning how what I see fits to my own reality, how I feel about it, what it makes, what the meaning it has for me, right? Through all these processing, I see the glorification of the Creator there. So the way I look at things should be universal in terms of using all my faculties at once.
I think overall what this paragraph is telling me, first, with proclaiming, by proclaiming your impotence and poverty, you position yourself in the creation You take a stand, you take a position, you acknowledge something about your own reality first. And then once you understand your own impotence and poverty, everything, all the perfections, all the beauty that is reflected in you or in the creation is coming from someone else. So acknowledging that and reading everything in the universe, every being in the universe with that perspective, and making the connection with their maker is really the gist of it. And then, like, once you are able to do that, like, offering thanks is like also in your nature automatically, almost like comes into play, that you offer thanks for all the bounties that you are given. And finally, like, everything that you go through, like, just reflection on your own experiences, on your, like, your own reality, and having that reflection becomes like a lifelong journey, like lessons that you can take. So that is like pretty much the like gist of like what the worship is. That's how I understand it.
And he's contrasting this to humans' faculties are not given to him for
not to be dedicated for this life,
yeah,
but like for something other than this world.
Yeah, for procuring this temporary verbal life, not for that, but for those. So he's describing an alternative, like, job description for men. Because our understanding of job description for men is, in today's society, primary school, secondary school, high school, university, whatever degree you can get, be successful, top of your class, get into the job after you get as much of education you can get. And once you are in your job, still get with online education, go to Coursera, whatever, get as much education as you can, get the best manager, whatever. I mean, all those sorts of things. Also, this is just the job aspect of it. Then in your personal life, maximizing fun or whatever, this is our job description as a human. But he's saying that it's not like that. These are given to men so that man is going to be a worshiper, understand what's going on, be thankful, constantly draw lessons from what the existence is telling him or her.
And dedicating all those faculties to this life only, this world only. In the next paragraph, that's what he says, like going down to the lowest of the low, which what like the verse refers to.
I wanted some thoughts on this universal I, in addition to other people have said. You know, when I think about vision in general, human vision, you know, Nursi always uses this idea or the notion of one's imagination. And really, human vision is a sort of imagination of the world, because anything one sees is not really external in a sense. It's a internal perception. And I mean, science will tell you how it takes place by some sort of chemical process, but it can't be from the cells themselves. It's an imagined aspect of the world internally. And you know what I take away, you know, what others have said from this universal I is the human, to tie other parts of Norsi's writing, like the Enna, the I, is essentially this conception of the entire universe. In one sense, when you look at something, like you're at a park, or you look at a tree or a river or another individual, and in a way you're imagining like the manifestations of it, that maker's names, a manifestation of those maker's names on that being. And at least personally, my imagination is drawn to all other beings within the cosmos. You know, and in a sense, it takes place internally, because I can't physically see something 1,000 light years away, 10,000 light years away, but one can imagine all those same not the same, but different degrees and manifestation of those same names that one sees within oneself from an external trigger. So in a sense, this connection is inward, between you and the source of existence. And it takes place through this sort of imagination, or as he calls it, a universal I. And I think that to me is like one of the miraculous aspect of the human being, in that he doesn't actually have to physically be in all places at once, but in a sense he can be. So
Suhail, I'm trying to understand what you said. So from another aspect, then, whatever I do is kind of universal, right? Because I am, as being human, with my nature, I am connected to everything, to entire universe with all its aspects. So whatever I do is universal, or let's say it can be universal. Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, just a personal experience. Some people may think this is crazy, but I go to, at least when I have some free time, go to the park. There's a waterfall, some rivers nearby, and one day I was looking down at the river flowing, and you can imagine, you, in a sense, the hearing is a sort of imagination of a quality that takes place within. But within that, I looked up, and then you see all this other the same manifestation of manifestation of the same name in different forms, and you realize, in a way, you're looking down at something is, in a sense, if you really are aware, connected to everything in the universe. And then you sort of, your mind is drawn, your intellect is drawn to other aspects, other distant, far off places in the cosmos, places that you've never been to or never seen. It kind of eliminates sort of any loneliness man has, and he realizes how connected he is to the source of existence. Because to be connected means to take a universal perspective. One cannot be, at least from my personal experience, cannot be connected to the source of existence unless one has a complete cosmic view, or as the university says, a universal I. And in that sense, in every moment, you can bear witness to the glorification of those things in this universe, by simply realizing how they make manifest, or how they display and reflect his divine names through their, numerous qualities. And it's not, I would say, it's not just governed to the present. Sometimes you think about the future and the past and the present all at once. And in that sense, it's also universal. So, to go from that, he takes it from Surah At-Teen, that verse, لَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ فِي أَحْسَنِ تَقْوِيمٍ. But in a sense, that excellent of patterns governs the pattern of humanity through all ages. So you can imagine, drawn to the ages in the past, and you have this sense and sort of feeling of what took place in the past and what will take place in the future. It's almost as if you're surrounded by it and enveloped by it. I don't know if people really reflect on the fact that you can, have a feeling or a sense of something that took place 1,000 years ago, and yet you weren't even physically present. I think this is what I like most about Nursi, is that he makes messengership an atemporal reality. There's no temporality to messengership. Even though Muhammad's body is dead, his messengership lives.
Interesting perspective, Suhail. So can you explain how the imagination of the vision, how does that become universal? Because like you were giving the example of the park and you're looking down at the stream of water going down, and then you hear certain things, and that arouses certain imagination, and how does that make the connection to, like, how do I make that universal connection to everything?
It's I don't, I mean, if anybody else has similar experiences, maybe they can share as well. But when you like look at the flow of water, and and I think Norsi has one where he talks about this. You realize, one manifestation of the name of all just, for example, in that you see the water flowing and neither the rock nor the water overtake one another. For example, both have their place in this earth, and you hear the sound they make, the voice, as if, in a sense, that's their glorification. And you realize how that takes place. And when you look up, you see the same manifestation, in a sense, where the wind and the trees, mingle with one another, and neither overtakes the other. And in the same way, you think about the deep reaches of space, and how in that emptiness you see the planets have their place in deep space, and they both share in the so to speak, the act of creation. Neither overtakes the other. So, one level upon another. It's really, in a sense, the understanding of divine unity, ahadiyya, how it takes place within the realm of the cosmos. Going from the micro to the macro. And in a sense, this is the ascension. That's how I think Muhammad made his ascension, is by having a universal eye. And not only that, but like I said, it's not restricted to the present. You can encompass the future and the past as well with that sort of imagination. Thinking about all of those patterns, all of those that each moment being a pattern, a cut from the same cloth. All those that took place in the past and all those will take place in the future. And in a sense, you can realize and really appreciate the nature of an absolute name, or an absolute divine quality, like mercy or compassion or knowledge. And to me, that is the only way, because that is how the name manifests. That's how the name manifests. I don't know if that's just me, but that's kind of how I.
No, alhamdulillah, that was very good. Alhamdulillah. I mean,
yeah, I don't know if others feel the same way, but it's to me, it's quite amazing that the human being can be. People always talk about the past, and they never realize how is it even possible that you can even capacitate, or have some sort of feeling about the past. It's already dead. And yet you can, in a sense, look at the past as a living glorification. And then you begin to understand the nature of absolute, how nothing is actually gone away into non-existence. So you bear witness to both the past, the present, and the future. So I was thinking about the verse, Walasar. And, people always say that's about the Lord of the universe swearing by his creation, or bearing witness to his creation. But in a sense, the Quran is a way to say that you can also, bear witness to the time, all of creation. You can bear witness to its glorification of me alone. It's not for him, it's for me. So to see what takes place within my own self, I can understand the nature of all time, from all that was to all that will be.
Thank you. So I think we are right on time.
I mean, to me, that's what, when I get this feeling when I read Nursi, is that to me, he was doing the same thing when he was in exile or seclusion, is that he had, when you read him, you're reading this, to me, I think you can see the power of his, imagination, universal eye, whatever word you want to call it. He has a complete, worldview. In a sense, the Quran has a universal eye as well, because it's not only speaks to me, but it speaks to every one of us individually. And it bears witness, in a sense, to the reality of the universe, to every being within the universe, to its own degree. And any one individual can confirm it. So, that's why I think, when Nursi says any word that's spoken from the human being, if it doesn't concern the divine, it's, in a sense, almost meaningless. That's what I think. I think Nursi has that, that understanding that you can't speak you can only speak except universally. There's no other way.
Alhamdulillah, thank you for sharing all that. All right, so shall we close, inshallah, for today?
سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم وآخر دعواهم أن الحمد لله رب العالمين. الفاتحة.